is up? My name is Megan. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. I hope you guys are doing well and staying safe, and welcome to a video I am so incredibly excited to be filming today, and that is a discussion and spoiler-free review of my favorite book of the year, and definitely a top 5 favorite books of all time, all genres combined, and that is Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. I'm acting like you haven't read the title already. So, the plan for this video is going to be, one, to give you guys the basic information about this book. Then we're going to go into my initial impressions and overall thoughts. We will also discuss characters, world building, as well as the themes explored in this book and why exactly it is that I love Tress of the Emerald Sea so much. And the aim of the game here is either to encourage you to pick this book up, or just to find people who have also read this book and want to gush about it with me. I would love to find more people who have read Tress of the Emerald Sea and want to chat about it, because, as I said, I read this book a couple of weeks ago, and I have a full 48-hour readathon vlog where I read this. If you want like my initial impressions, I will leave it in the cards. But I just fell so head over heels in love with it that I've just been thinking about it every day since, and I was like, I just need to sit down and chat with you guys about it. So, without further ado, let's hop on in. So, what is Tress of the Emerald Sea? Tress of the Emerald Sea is Brandon Sanderson's first secret project book that was released in 2023. Everybody has heard about it. It's like the biggest Kickstarter to ever exist. And essentially, Tress of the Emerald Sea is a story that is very similar to The Princess Bride. Brandon Sanderson took inspiration from that. However, he very much turned the story on its head, whereas in The Princess Bride, we have Buttercup, who is very helpless and, you know, can't do a lot for herself. And then we get Tress, who is a main character who may be ordinary but accomplishes extraordinary things in the name of self-discovery and true love. And so this story is the story of Tress, who lives on the Emerald Sea, on this island, and has lived a very content life. Tress collects cups. She can't really leave the island, no one really can, and so it's just her living her life there with her family, and she gets along with her family so well. We're gonna rediscuss that, but you know, she has family, she has this boy she loves, and she has her cups, and she hears people talk about her adventures, and she's content until the boy that she loves is leaving to find a bride with his father, although he does not wish to, and never returns, and Tress takes it upon herself to go rescue this boy. And so this obviously brings about a lot of adventure. We follow Tress on the Emerald Sea and so many other seas, and basically she goes from one pirate ship to the next, and it's basically a big old story of adventure out on what the sea is in the Cosmere, and it's Tress finding out about herself and going on the quest to find the boy that she really loves. And there's so many other things along the way, which we'll obviously discuss in a spoiler-free manner, but that is essentially what Tress is in a nutshell. Obviously, it's so much more than that, but I will start this review off by saying that if you have never read anything else by Brandon Sanderson and are intimidated because this is set in the Cosmere, which is a huge world that Brandon Sanderson has written, you don't need to be nervous about any of that. I, for one, when I read Tress, only had The Way of Kings under my belt. I am not a big fantasy reader, and I was kind of worried that I wasn't going to understand anything. I do have an advantage of having other people in my life who have read the Cosmere, however, I did not, so I had very minimal knowledge of this world. But the thing is, in this book, Brandon Sanderson treats other things in the Cosmere more as Easter eggs than he does like something you actually need to know. So you're gonna get the big picture story, and you're gonna get all the enjoyment out of the main story. You might just not get the little Easter eggs, and honestly, it doesn't really change anything to the enjoyment. So I thought that that was something really, like, everybody needs to know. I also think that this book is very different in the way that it is a very whimsical story, and I think, for one, not being the biggest fantasy reader, I am going through my Brandon Sanderson journey, but I'm not a fantasy reader primarily. I'm more of a middle grade and romance reader, and I think that this book is an exceptional way to dip your toe into the ocean of fantasy, because it feels like a fairy tale. It is told as a storytelling story. We have Hoyd, who is a character in the Cosmere, telling the story to us and breaking the fourth wall and just having this fairy tale that is told in a very whimsical manner that would bring in a lot of middle grade readers. I think you could read this with your children without having any issues. It is not a dark story, it's a story of hope, and it is told in such a whimsical and lyrical way that if you enjoy middle grade and have never read adult fantasy, or if you like romance, the romance part of the story will be enough to grip you and kind of transfix you and want to make you read more. I will also say, if you are like me and are a fan of pirate stories and you don't read a lot of fantasy aside from that, because that's what I used to be. I was primarily a romance reader, but I did love the occasional pirate story, and I think that is also something else that is primarily in here that could grasp your attention. So I do think this book is for everyone. Some people say it feels kind of like YA because of the lack of darkness, but I've heard another reviewer say that you don't need darkness to have a real good fantasy book, and I could not agree more. So I do think it would suit a lot of different audiences. So what are my initial thoughts about this? One is that I absolutely adore the narration style, and I could not recommend the audiobook for this story enough. I did a tandem read where I did read the book physically, but I also listened to the story, and it is such a beautiful thing to listen to, because the story, as I mentioned, is told by this character named Hoyd, who you see a lot in the Cosmere. At least he was in the Stormlight Archives. And essentially, this character is telling you about a story that has happened, and he's telling you Tress's story, but Hoyd is actually also a character in Tress's story. And during his time with Tress, he's actually under a curse, and he is one really wacky character, but I loved seeing the comparison of Hoyd with his mental capacities telling you a story, and Hoyd also being in there, and like its contrast was really interesting. And I think that this book perfectly captures the essence of a fairy tale that is told through a storyteller. And it was just like, the whole time I was listening to the audiobook, it felt like I was listening to a movie, and I am someone who has no capacity whatsoever to create images in my brain while reading a book, but this is the first time ever that I could clearly see Tress, I could clearly see the crew, I could see the boat, I could see the love interest, I can just envision the island where she is from and where she was going, and it was just such a beautiful thing. And the main protagonist is like my favorite ever, and I'm gonna deep dive into that. But Hoyd in itself, the way he tells the story is funny, it's lighthearted, it adds so much whimsy to the story, and just I love how he breaks the fourth wall continuously. And the story refers to us as people who live here on Earth, and obviously the story is told in the Cosmere, it is not Earth, and so there's this comparison to kind of help you out. And like, for example, the Emerald Sea is not actually water, it's kind of like what they refer to as alien dust. And Hoyd explains to you the difference and how you can relate to like the boat on this dust being like a boat in the water. And so it really helps with the imagery in the story. And I think that that is one of the strongest things, and why I think it's such an entry-level fantasy, because it can help you kind of wrap your mind around all of these more complex ideas. Another really strong suit of this book is the writing itself and the pacing. I cannot stress this enough, that the pacing of this book to me is like a 10 out of 10 perfection. The chapters are short, they keep you on your toes, something happens, and just the lining up of the events make sense. Like, I have no complaints as to how this book was written. I think it's a little bit more of a pretty prose than you get in The Way of Kings. If I were to compare something else I have read by Brandon Sanderson, I think there's very much more of that storytelling element rather than just like these events are happening and going off other literary devices to create your story. I think this one is really much based on the writing and how the whimsy is introduced to the story, and that's really what gives it its fairy tale vibes. And as I said, this book is very much in the tone of hopefulness and not just big bad dark things and like people going through trauma. This is very much more on the lighter end of that, and obviously Tress has her own personal baggage, but it's very much in a tone of finding yourself and how the journey is inspiring. So if I were to discuss a little bit of the world building, I would say that it is not the most complicated story to follow for someone who doesn't read fantasy. I think that the concepts, as I said, of the Emerald Sea being actual like alien dust, and the story includes spheres and all of the magic related to the spheres and everything else going on in the like magical sense of it, was easy enough to grasp. I'm not saying I understood 100% of the story on the first go around, and I'd always think there's merit to rereading books, especially fantasy, is what I'm learning in my journey. But I do think that the basics are easy enough to understand, that like you don't need to have read 100 fantasy books to kind of get on board with the story. I also think that the story of like the water and the pirate vibes was immaculate. I've said this time and time again on my channel that I was looking for the next pirate book that I was going to devour and just absolutely love, and this really gave it to me because it blended the perfect mix of like life on a ship and living with the crew and the hardships that come with that, and the actual like acts of piracy, of killing people and stealing treasure, was very much in this book. But it also had the moral compass of what piracy actually entails and where these people actually wanted to get to, and what was the aim of becoming pirates. Because in this book it's kind of explored that like there's a difference between like regular pirates, that like you have races and kind of is a contest to steal other people's treasures, and then people who actually kill other people, and that is very much frowned upon. And Tress is kind of put into so many like high stakes situations, and I just think that the pirate vibes were done so well. I felt like I was there. She was scrubbing the floor. She was trying to make her place in a crew, and it's just like the backstories of the people and why they became pirates is also so incredibly well thought out and explored. And every side character that had a name, because not all of them do, had their own storyline, their own motives, and it just brought the entire story together. Because we had Tress, but we had Tress and we had so many other people who also made the choice to become pirates, and we kind of deep dive into why they are there and what their purpose is. And I just love a story that can both give you the vibes of a pirate story but also give you the background as to the like why people are pirates, and I feel like that balance was so well done. And so I felt like the stakes were high enough and everything just flowed seamlessly in regards to it being like a water-based story, even though it's not water-based, you know what I mean, like it's a pirate story is what I'm getting at, and I really love that. I also think that the like evil person in this is a sorceress, and Tress is obviously on a quest to find this evil person. And the way that the sorceress was created, and I've heard that she is in other books, she's a very interesting character, but she's not overly developed, and I think some people might see that as boring, but I don't think the sorceress is at all the point of the story. And so she's kind of there and obviously makes the plot advance, but this is much more a story of self-discovery and found family and love and so many other things with a plot line of the sorceress. And so we don't learn that much about her, but I think we have enough of the baselines to make the stakes interesting and for you to know that she's not the greatest person, but she's not the biggest evil out there either. And I think that was really interesting because in the story, the storyteller Hoyd has a relationship with the sorceress, and so the way he describes her is kind of like a dig at her at the same time, and so it creates these dynamics that are incredibly complex, but I loved. And I also do think that the storyline itself is predictable in the way that a fairy tale is predictable, and that we are more so here for the moral of the story and the adventure itself than to untangle webs in a huge plot line. I think that like the Way of Kings is much more like Easter egg after Easter egg of you trying to figure out where the heck things are going, whereas this, you have many clues as to like the little plot lines and reveals, and so you piece them together. But does that take away from the enjoyment? Not at all, because it's a fairy tale. When I go and watch Cinderella, I know exactly what's going to happen. When I read a romance book, I know exactly that they're going to end up together. I'm there for the ride of how it's all going to unfold, and I think this is what Tress of the Emerald Sea is in fantasy form. Last thing I wanted to touch on in the world building is that there's actually a talking rat. And as soon as we were introduced to this character, I absolutely loved it. Now, obviously, if you know Tress, you know all the implications of the talking rat in this world. But just like having talking animals in books is one of my favorite things ever. And so as soon as we were introduced to this rat, I was like, I'm obsessed with you. And the obsession just grew because obviously it's a talking rat, and this rat likes to tell stories, and he like trusts Tress with her life, and the relationship between Tress and that rat is so fun, and he's so useful to the plot, and I had the best time. Let's move into like Tress herself as a character, because I think that and the themes of this book are where I have the most to say. Now, Tress, and this is touched upon in the book, is a very ordinary girl with no like powers, and she did not hate her life. She didn't go on this big adventure because she thought her life was too ordinary. I think that Tress is an ordinary character who liked her life being ordinary. She liked her cups and she liked her family. And this is a story about how Tress can be ordinary and do extraordinary things. And I think that this is both a incredible character feature but also a theme of this book, that like ordinary people do extraordinary things all the time, and those are the real heroes. Tress is compared to a hero in the story at several occasions, and I think it's a perfect way to describe her. She is an ordinary hero. She's an everyday person who had moral convictions and wanted to get things done, and she took it upon herself to get out of her comfort zone and just do it even though she was scared. Tress is the definition of doing something scared but doing it anyways, and I highly envy that side of Tress, and I love Tress. I will say Tress is probably one of the characters, or the character, I relate most to in all the books I've read in my entire life, and this is definitely what has created this sentimental attachment to this book, because Tress is simple. She's a simple girl. She wants romance. She loves her parents. She is someone who, when she says she's going to do something, she does it. She sticks to her word. She sticks to her guns, and she just feels so incredibly real. Tress is motivated by empathy and sympathy and the need to help others and like propagate kindness, and she always sees the best in people and always wants to trust everyone, and I am like that. If you are new to my channel, I am a social worker, and I think that the values that Tress demonstrates in this book are the values I live my life by. I always want to give the benefit of the doubt to everyone. I am a very trusting person, and I myself want other people to trust me, and I will do everything in my power to hold that trust and cherish it, and I think that Tress always goes in with the best intentions, and that is very much something that influences the plot, because Tress always wanted to give everybody the benefit of the doubt and not wanting to let people down. Tress is somewhat of a people pleaser, and I feel like clinically I could deconstruct Tress and talk about it more, but this is not the purpose of this review, though I think it would be a fun video. But Tress is just so relatable in her acts of kindness. She is a logical, scholarly person at the same time, and she uses her rational thinking and wanting to keep herself safe in order to advance in the story, and that is her real power. The time that she takes to reflect upon her actions, admitting her wrongdoings, and doing better the next time is how Tress moves in life, and that is how the plot advances. Tress commits an action or has a reflection, uses that to power herself through and move on and take another actionable step, and that is how we get the storyline. Tress doesn't have powers. She's not walking on walls. She's not like teleporting herself and manipulating people's mentality. She is just a pure and kind soul who uses her logic and her ability to connect with other people and uses that to get herself forward. She doesn't take advantage of people. She works in collaboration with other people, and that in of itself is something I don't often see in books, and it is very much portrayed as something that is positive and not a weakness. And I just think that that is the most beautiful thing that you can do and put in a character and have a character succeed, because I do think that she is fueled by all the right reasons, and she's such a gentle soul, and her collecting cups and just her being such a vulnerable person and being fueled by wanting to find the person she loves, and then going on this whole self-discovery journey about how we change when we leave home for the first time was also something that was so incredibly well done. And I don't want to go too much into that because I feel like it's spoiler territory, but I will say that the growth that Tress has and recognizes that she has is phenomenal, because she left the comfort of her home and she left her family in order to go find herself without really knowing. At first, Tress is definitely going to find her love, who is called Charlie, but throughout the story it becomes less and less about Charlie and more about Tress, and Tress becoming this even better version of herself and getting to explore and realize what it is she wants out of life, except like aside from that island. And Tress will always have this love for her parents, but she's also growing into her own self, and I just loved all of it. I love how she stayed true to her roots but also grew, and I think that she's like the most well done character I've ever seen, and I love Tress. And as I said, I love Tress because I see myself in her, and I do think that some people will call her childish or say that she's not the most interesting character in fantasy. And are they right? Probably. But again, it comes back to Tress being an ordinary person on this extraordinary adventure, and I love her. I could go into it more, and as I said, if you guys want to chat with me and give me your opinions on Tress, I would love to hear all about it. I will say I also loved pretty much every crew member that you're supposed to like, dislike the ones you're not supposed to like, and I loved the balance between good and evil in this book, and how also evil also has motivations for what they are doing. And like when you learn about the characters' backstories of why they are evil, it makes a lot of sense, and you feel empathy towards them, which leads me to the main theme of Tress of the Emerald Sea, which is empathy. I think that Brandon Sanderson has become, with this at least, a favorite author of mine because of how he explores the themes of empathy and sympathy, and how it is a superpower, and how it's not something that you're supposed to look down on, and how empathy doesn't make you weak. I think that the way he explores this is absolutely outstanding, and as again someone who is a social worker and someone who feels a lot of empathy for others, it was very refreshing to see it as a power in of itself and not a weakness. And there's this specific quote I would like to read to you guys because I think it perfectly describes the whole of this book. The quote goes as follows: "It might seem that the person who can feel for others is doomed in life. Isn't one person's pain enough? Why must a person like Tress feel for two or more? Yet I found that the people who are the happiest are the ones who learn best how to feel. It takes practice, you know, effort. And those who, late in life, have been feeling for 2, 3, or 1,000 different people, well, turns out they've had a leg up on everyone else all along." And so this quote very much demonstrates the importance of empathy, and how empathy is a power, and how being empathetic towards other people and towards yourself, because I feel like Tress shows herself the proper amount of empathy, is something that will indeed get you far in life and will help construct meaningful long-term relationships with others, and will gain with empathy you gain access to other people's truth, and people trust you, and you know, it just brings a whole lot of characters when you are empathetic. And I feel like it really provides space to grow, and just providing empathy towards others is like the most tender thing a human being can do, and it helps you put things into perspective. And I think that this book, like, this is the theme of the book. It is empathy towards yourself, towards others, towards your circumstances, and it is just so well done. And I do think that Tress takes a lot of the emotions of others into consideration, and she doesn't want to hurt people willingly, and that is also part of empathy. And I just love the way that this theme is set throughout the entire book. This book also talks about, and I love this, how it's okay to be rescued and to be in need of people. And I think that this message is kind of brought upon more about the end of the book, when Tress has gone into has gotten herself into all these situations and complex things, and she at first wants to be the one to save everyone, and she wants to do it all on her own and be independent and do all of these things. But throughout the book, she obviously has the help of other people, and when it comes down to it, Tress realizes that it's okay to be rescued and it's okay to need people, but it's also okay to like provide that for other people, as long as you're the kind of person who was deserving of such actions. And I think that that little caveat, and I've heard a lot of people say like, oh, that was like extra cheesy and like I don't think it was needed in there. I disagree, because here's the thing, it's okay to need help, and as a social worker I think everybody deserves help when they need it. However, I also think that it's important to set a standard for yourself that you deserve to be helped, and that like your actions go hand in hand with that philosophy. If you think that everybody deserves help, then you should be there to help other people. You should be kind to other people, and you should just like the bare minimum, you know. If you're an evil person, like sure, I'll still help you because everybody deserves to be helped and it's a right to be helped. But are you deserving of such help? Is kind of an ethical qualm, and I think that that exploration is very interesting in this book. And again, I do think that everybody in the world deserves help, whether you've done good or bad things, but I do think that Tress's take on it is really interesting. But just the moral of the story being, it's okay to need help and it's okay to go out there and help other people, I just think was done so well. And I loved also how this book was originally a quest of love and ended up being a quest of personal growth and self-love instead, and how we kind of twisted a love story to be like a story about loving yourself, and it was just phenomenal. Obviously, I could chat about this book for hours, but I think that these are the main things that I wanted to share about why it is I love this story and why this story is great and a little bit different from any other things I've read when it comes to fantasy, whether that be in middle grade or the small amount of adult books that I've read that deal with fantasy. And I'm obsessed with it. Again, I would love to chat with some of you guys about it. I will add a little segment at the end with my favorite quotes of this book. And I will say this is the first time in my life that I've let myself highlight inside a book, which goes to show how many quotes I loved. So if you guys want to exit the video now, if you don't care for quotes, if you're not a quote girly or guy, I totally get that. But for those of you who want to stay a few extra minutes, I will just be reading some of my favorite quotes and I'll let you go. But I will say thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you guys soon with another video. So here are some of my out of context favorite quotes. The first is, physical labor is great for the mind as it leaves all kinds of time to consider the world. Other work, like accounting or scribing, demands little of the body, but siphons the energy of the mind. And I'm not going to go into why, obviously I love these quotes so much, but just know that I do. And if you read them, also if you've read the book, let me know what your favorite quotes are. Some of my others are, one of the great tragedies of life is knowing how many people in the world are made to soar, paint, sing, or steer, except they never get the chance to find out. The next quote I love is, as always, she spent the time thinking. I would call the gift of thoughtfulness a double-edged sword, but I've always found the metaphor lacking. The vast majority of swords have two edges, and I've not found them to be any more likely to cut their owner than the single-edged variety. It is the sharpness of the welder, and not the sharpness of the sword, that foreshadows mishap. That was so hard to read. The next quote I love is, but the person who is willing to reconsider their assumptions, the hero who can sit down and reevaluate their life, well now, that is a gemstone that truly glitters, friend. Could not agree more. I will leave you with one more quote, though I will say like all of the orange tabs in my book, which is a lot, are highlighted quotes, but I'm not going to keep you here for another hour and a half. So, the last quote is, even small actions have consequences, and while we can often choose our actions, we really get to choose our consequences. These are all like super thought-provoking things that I like kind of had to sit down while reading the book and just like think over, so I wanted to share them with you guys. But there are, as I said, a lot more quotes, and if you read the book, feel free to message me with your favorite quotes. So again, thank you so much for watching and making it this far, and I'll see you very soon with another video. Bye guys.